is a tugboat and a friendly tugboat too. A friendly tugboat too. Oh, Theodore likes to do the things that friendly tugboats do.
Hello. Isn't this a beautiful castle? I'm going to put it in the bottom of my fish tank. My friend Rodney has one just like it in his fish tank. That's where I got the idea. Except my castle is much bigger than Rodney's. When he sees it, he's going to think that my tank is the best. I'm going to invite him over to see it. But first, I'm going to very carefully take the top off my tank. Put it over there. Then, all right, fish. Here's your new castle. Oh, you look at that. It's supposed to sit on the bottom of the tank. But it won't sink. I'm getting a sinking feeling that I don't want to invite Rodney over. That's kind of funny, actually. You see, just the other day, Hank had a sinking feeling, too. And a sunken ship. One dark and moonlit night, out by the entrance to the Big Harbour, deep beneath the waves, Northumberland submarine was cruising home from his underwater patrol. He saw something hidden beyond the edge of a great underwater cliff. He nosed himself around the edge and gasped out loud at what he saw. There, on the bottom of the ocean, lay a sunken ship, forgotten and mysterious. "Wait till I tell the tugs about this," he shouted. Back at the Great Ocean Tug and Salvage Company dock, the tugboats were gathered round for storytelling time. George was beginning another one of his big stories. "I was moving over in the oil rig out on the ocean," he announced. George boomed his engine just to make sure everyone was listening to him very carefully. "Suddenly, I saw a giant iceberg coming straight for us." The tugboats all moved a little closer to hear every word. "How big was the iceberg?" asked Fodak. "Oh, big as a building," boomed George. Hank squirmed his way into the circle. "I was moving a barge once," he said in his biggest voice. "Yes, Hank?" asked George. "And I saw a bumper in the water coming straight for us." Hank tried to roar his engine like George, but it was more of a burp than a boom. He said, clearing his throat. The bumper was as big as a... As a bumper?" suggested Fodak. I guess so," said Hank quietly. "Anything else, Hank?" asked Emily. "No," said Hank. "So, anyway, there I was," said George, continuing his story. Hank looked around at the faces of the other tugs, all smiling at George. "I wish I had a better story to tell," he said to himself. No sooner had Hank said that when a voice shouted, "Guess what I found?" Northumberland submarine had popped up beside the tugs. "A sunken ship," he shouted. "Well, that is very interesting," said Fodak. "Yes, tell us about it, Northumberland," smiled Theodore. The tugboats all moved very close to hear every word. Northumberland began to tell them about the sunken ship. Even the dispatcher turned to listen. As Hank listened too, he began to grow more and more excited. "A sunken ship," he said to himself. "If only I could bring that ship back up. That would be the best story ever." Bright and early the next day, before the other tugboats were even awake, Hank quietly slipped away from the Great Ocean dock. He hurried over to the Navy Yard, where he found Northumberland, fast asleep, of course. Northumberland always slept all day and cruised under the ocean at night. "Northumberland! Northumberland!" whispered Hank. "Wake up! Wake up!" He gave the sub a little nudge just to get things going.
"Huh?"
said Northumberland groggily.
"Is it nighttime already?"
"Northumberland," said Hank, "can you show me where the sunken ship is, please? Can you, Northumberland? Please." Northumberland decided that the only way he was going to get any sleep was to show Hank where the shipwreck was. Oh, this will be a great start to my story, Hank said to himself. Let me see. I followed Northumberland out of the harbor. Hank was already practicing the great story he was going to tell the tugs that night about raising the sunken ship. It was cloudy. The water was very watery. Meanwhile, back at the Great Ocean Dock, the other tugboats were gathering around the dispatcher for the morning work meeting.
"Where is Hank?"
said the dispatcher. Well, Theodore looked around, and sure enough, Hank was nowhere to be seen.
"It feels like a storm's coming in,"
Fodak told the group. Northumberland and Hank arrived above the sunken ship.
It's straight down there.
Yawned Northumberland. Thanks, Northumberland, smiled Hank.
You're welcome,
Yawned Northumberland, anxious to get back to sleep. Hank began to lower his special hauling rope with a big hook on the end to raise the sunken ship. Down, down, down went Hank's rope into the depths. He moved his hook this way, that way, and that way again, trying to snag the sunken ship. Got it, said Hank finally. He made his toughest tugging face. 1, 2, 3, heave! Oh, this ship is really big, Hank said out loud. I bet it's bigger than a bumper. No, a building. No, bigger than well, whatever's bigger than a building. Hank didn't notice, but the wind and waves were really beginning to blow and batter him. The storm had arrived. In the Big Harbour, the other tugboats noticed the storm too, and they also noticed that Hank was still nowhere to be seen.
"We'll have to search for him," announced the dispatcher. "Please proceed immediately."
The tugboats set off to look for Hank, bracing themselves against the wind and the whitecaps. I hope Hank's all right, said Theodore quietly. Hank was swinging and swaying this way and that in the storm. While down below, his hauling rope was swinging and swaying too, right around the sunken ship's mast. Hank tried to raise the sunken ship again, but it seemed his hauling rope was stuck on something.
"Are you stuck there, boy?"
A voice came hollering out of the storm. Hank turned and saw the little cable ship.
"No,"
he hollered back.
"You don't need a tow or nothing."
Called Digby.
"I'm fine,"
shouted Hank. He wanted this to be his adventure and not Digby's.
"Well, am I stuck then?"
Digby went on.
"No,"
shouted Hank.
"Good, boy. Oh, good,"
said Digby.
"Then I'm heading home. Only mad boats and barnacles stay out in a big blow like this."
Hank smiled to himself. A big storm was just great for his story, and this was getting to be a really big storm. Suddenly, his engine quit. Hank had been working so hard trying to raise that sunken ship that he had used up all his oil. Hank saw that the storm was pushing him towards the coast, and he was attached to the ship down below, just like a balloon on a string. Wait till I tell everyone about this, he crowed. I bet those rocks are as big as a bumper. No, a building. No, well, whatever's bigger than a building. Anyway, he went on, you sure are bigger than me. Hank had a thought, a terrible thought. I think, he told himself, I think I'm going to crash into those rocks. Theodore was still searching for Hank near the Navy Yards. It was almost night, and he knew finding his friend in the dark would be even more difficult. Northumberland was just waking up, ready for another night under the ocean.
Did Hank raise that sunken ship?
He yawned at Theodore. Sunken ship, repeated Theodore.
I wish I was home in my dock listening to my story right now,
Hank groaned.
instead of still being in my story.
One big wave would be all it took to dash him into the rocks. Just then, a faint light pierced the gloom. At first, Hank thought he was seeing things. But then, Theodore appeared through the dark, and Northumberland was with him. Hank blew his whistle as loud as he could.
Over here! Help! Theodore!
He cried. Theodore shouldered on through the storm. My rope is stuck, groaned Hank.
Down there!
Hold steady, Hank, shouted Theodore. Finally, he was close enough to his friend to button on.
Thanks for coming, Theodore.
Said Hank.
I'm really glad to see you.
Northumberland dived. Down, down, down went the sub. And soon he could see the trouble. Quickly, he began to untangle Hank's hauling rope. Hank's rope came free so suddenly that the two tugs were almost jerked into the rocks. But Theodore held on, and they were safe. Hank, you'll have a great story to tell everybody tonight, said Theodore as he towed Hank home. I will, said Hank. Sure, Theodore went on. About the sunken ship. But I didn't even raise it, Hank said sadly. I ran out of oil and I almost crashed. I wanted to have the best story, but instead, it's probably the worst story ever. Just then, the other tug saw Hank. Look, shouted Foduck. There! It is Hank! Theodore was helping him towards the dock. Everyone was overjoyed to see Hank safe and sound again. Tell us what happened, Hank, said Emily. The tugboats all moved very close to hear every word. I tried to raise a sunken ship, Hank began, but then he stopped. He looked around at all the smiling faces, and suddenly he knew just what to say. But the very best part of this story, he told the tugs, is the ending. It's when I came home to all my good friends.
That's a great story, Hank,
said Foduck. It sure is, agreed Theodore.
I remember when I raised a sunken ship once,
interrupted George.
I think it was a supertanker.
Well, the tugs all had a very good laugh about that.
Hank's story has helped me make up my mind. Even if I can't get my castle to sink, I'm going to invite Rodney over to see my fish tank. May not have a big castle, but Rodney will still like me just as much. Right now, though, I think I better take this castle back to the pet store. Thanks for visiting us here in the Big Harbour. We'll see you all again next time. I'd look pretty silly with a castle on my head, wouldn't I? Bye-bye.
Theodore, he's a tugboat and a friendly tugboat too. A friendly tugboat too. Oh, Theodore likes to do the things that friendly tugboats do. Pushing and a pulling in the great big harbor, in the great big world is so much fun. So many brand new things to discover. Waking with the sun, gotta get the job done. Oh, Theodore and Emily, Foduck, Hank and George, and the Harbourmaster too.